Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Reaction is still coming in from the verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial, including a comment from U.S. President Joe Biden. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole speaks out against the Liberals' new national childcare plan, and calls for the Emergency Act to be implemented would be disastrous for the provinces. That's according to political reporter Brian Lilley, who will explain why.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. U.S. President Joe Biden says the conviction of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin in the killing of George Floyd is a giant step forward in the fight against systemic racism. He says, however, it's not enough and has called for swift police reform.
It was a murder in the full light of day, and it ripped the blinders off for the whole world to see the systemic racism the Vice President just referred to. The systemic racism is a stain on our nation's soul. The knee on the neck of justice for Black Americans. Profound fear and trauma. The pain, the exhaustion that Black and brown Americans experience every single day. And I also spoke with George Floyd's family again. A remarkable family of extraordinary courage. Nothing can ever bring their brother, their father back. But this can be a giant step forward in the march toward justice in America.
George Floyd's brother expressed relief and joy following the conviction of Derek Chauvin. Chauvin was found guilty of second and third degree murder, along with second-degree manslaughter, and will be sentenced in 2 months.
Oh man, it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. It's an amazing feeling because this is history. You know, we had our doubts. We thought it was. I'm shocked because I didn't think it was going to be all three. I thought it was at least going to be one not guilty. You know what I'm saying? But all three, this is history. This is amazing because this is a stepping stone. This is the beginning. This is not the say all end all. So we still got some more work to do, and I believe that's my purpose, to make sure that you know that bill get passed, that you know my children are good, my children's children are good.
A police officer in Columbus, Ohio, shot and killed a teenage girl on Tuesday afternoon. Police body cam shows the officer shooting the black girl as she appeared to attempt to stab 2 people with a knife. Now, warning here, the video you're about to see does contain some graphic images.
Normally we don't provide information this soon, but we understand the public's need, desire, and expectation to have transparency upon what happened. We've worked very hard tonight to provide you a short video of the officer, the first officer that arrived at scene, and this is the officer that did ultimately fire his weapon. The information was that a caller said females were there trying to stab them and put their hands on them. Deadly force can be used to protect yourself or the protection of a third person. So that is within the policy, and that is within the law. That is what the law says. Whether this complies with that will be part of that investigation.
The federal budget laid out just over $27 billion in new spending over 5 years that the Liberal government wants to send provinces to subsidize childcares under its childcare plan.
One of the things that this past year has highlighted is the challenge about what happens when there isn't accessible, affordable childcare out there for families. And we've known for a long time that it was the right thing to do, but as we've seen during this pandemic, it's also the smart thing to do. And the business community and people across the political spectrum have now understood that. And that's why this government is really excited about moving forward in partnership with the provinces.
Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says Canadian families want certainty and flexibility on a potential national childcare plan. He says the Liberals' recently announced budget pledge came without consultations with the provinces, and it does not support all families.
The Liberal Party of Canada has promised a national daycare plan 9 times. Even cats only have 9 lives. I think Canadian families, particularly in a pandemic, want certainty and want flexibility, particularly with more families that may have partial work at home, needs where they can rely on families or others. Let's give flexibility and support for families. That's what the Conservatives did originally. Mr. Trudeau renamed the program but stuck with it. Now he's proposing not helping all families, and 5 or 6 years from now, having a plan that he didn't even consult the provinces on.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says he's not sure if Ottawa's proposed childcare plan would be a right fit for Albertans. The plan has been celebrated by family advocates for being forward-thinking, particularly for low and middle-class Canadians. Kenney says the Liberal plan would only support what he calls urban 9-to-5 government and union-run institutional daycare options. Premier Kenney says the UCP respects BC's plan to restrict non-essential travel from outside the province, but he says Alberta will not bring in a similar plan to reduce the transmission of COVID-19. The BC government announced Monday that it would implement roadside checks to reduce non-essential travel and will post signs along the provincial boundary to warn motorists. Kenney agrees with BC Premier John Horgan that now is not the right time for non-essential travel. COVID-19 outbreaks have prompted Edmonton public and Catholic schools to shift junior and senior high school students to online learning for the next couple of weeks. Education Minister Adriana LaGrange says there was more than one criteria which led to the decision.
A chronic substitute teacher shortage, a significant number of students and staff in quarantine or isolation, recent requests from the board for short-term shifts for a number of their schools, and substantial COVID cases in the community.
Calgary and Fort McMurray school districts have already shifted many of their students to online learning. The province says there are coronavirus outbreaks at 567 schools across the province. The Alberta government wants to hear from you when it comes to putting together a new draft of the kindergarten through grade 6 curriculum. The province has set up an online tool allowing Albertans to provide input as the current draft is being modified. Government officials say the revised curriculum will give students a strong base of essential knowledge for future learning. The new K-6 curriculum will be founded on 4 key learning themes, which are literacy, math, citizenship, and practical skills. The province is hoping to roll out the new curriculum to elementary school students in 2022 and 2023. Dozens of Albertans were lined up outside of Edmonton's Expo Centre to get the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine after Premier Jason Kenney lowered the age eligibility for the vaccine to 40. Kenney said more than 27,000 people booked an appointment for the vaccine following Monday's announcement.
My boys pushed me to do it because they want me to make sure that the grandkids see me and that I can hug them. So that's the most important for them. And so I said, okay. It was nothing, just we couldn't feel anything about the vaccine. It was really so smooth. I couldn't even feel it. I like not like even like mosquito bite. I feel it, but this one I couldn't feel it.
Yeah, we've been waiting. I have senior parents that were around, and I have a child who has asthma, and so we'd just like to have some type of protection. We just decided that we would come and walk in. We could have booked online, but we thought, well, we're both home today, so we may as well just come and wait in line.
The province announced that the AstraZeneca shots are now available on a walk-in basis at clinics in Lethbridge, Camrose, Red Deer, Grand Prairie, and Fort McMurray. All Albertans born in 1981 or earlier are eligible to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Government officials said that they're also introducing legislation that will make amendments to the Employment Standards Code to ensure that working Albertans can access up to 3 hours of paid leave to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Officials say this will allow employees to take the necessary time away from work without fear of penalty or loss of pay while getting their shot. Local businesses and nonprofits in our city are set to receive some much-needed financial help. Applications for the Community Event Support Grant and Community Capital Support Grant are now being accepted by the City of Lethbridge. Laurie Harrison from the city says that many have reached out to say they were in need and wanted to continue to support community events in the city during the pandemic.
We have been encouraging event coordinators and not-for-profit organizations to plan to their level of comfort, but also to be flexible because really with COVID, things change so quickly that it's generally 1 or 2 weeks before the event before they can even get permission from Alberta Health Services to even go ahead. As well, the city likes to have sort of a pandemic plan filed with any event permits that we hand out. So making sure that people have considered different things like PPE and social distancing and whatnot. We've been very flexible with events that have applied during the pandemic, and some have been canceled and postponed, and we just work with those groups knowing that this is out of their control and our control.
Applications for the grants will be accepted until April the 30th. It may be a hot real estate market here in southern Alberta, but buying or selling a home during a pandemic comes with its own set of challenges. Video journalist Naveen Day caught up with a Lethbridge realtor who shares what you need to know before buying or selling.
The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown millions of people's financial plans off the rails, and that certainly includes home buying. Even amid economic and health restriction uncertainties, Jeff Reimer with Royal LePage South Country Real Estate says buying and selling is still very active in southern Alberta. He lists safety protocols that realtors have in place to make the buying experience as safe as possible.
Buyers come, they're going to have to answer a questionnaire about their health and being around, traveling, being around sick people, not touching things, sanitizing, wearing masks, limiting the number of people going into a home to just the people that are buying it and not other groups. No open houses. On the selling side, we want to make sure that lights are on, cabinets are open, closets, drawers are open so that people don't have to touch as little as possible, right? Leave less imprint. And then having the lights on, it makes the house show brighter anyways. And so there's a few things like that we can do to make it simpler on the agent as well.
While the pandemic has created challenges with almost every transaction of our lives, the real estate market stays hot in many areas in Lethbridge, and Reimer explains what is driving it.
The low interest rates are a key driving factor. So they want to keep the economy going, and housing is one of the bright spots of the economy. So the low interest rates keeping people moving money, ability to buy and qualify easier. People investing don't want to have their money in the banks where they're not getting good interest rates. So investing in real estate's a good idea. Plus we have cross-border limitations. So money investing south of the border and also entertainment and travel is limited. So people are keeping their money here in southern Alberta.
Reimer adds that the homes in highest demand are the single-family detached houses. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Lethbridge City Council has approved another extension of property tax payments. Anyone who is unable to make payments by the June 30th deadline will have an additional 92 days before penalties are applied. City officials say property tax notices will be sent out by the end of May, but those who are struggling due to the pandemic now have until October the 1st. Penalties on outstanding balances will be a 3% increase on October 1st, 4% on November 1st, and 5% on December 1st. A local man is asking drivers to slow down when they make their way through neighborhoods. The Slow Your Roll campaign started last year after an unfortunate car accident that ended in the death of a 10-year-old boy in Lethbridge. Micah Quinn has the details.
This memorial in honor of Charles McIntyre serves as a reminder for residents of Lethbridge to not forget the young boy. He was struck and killed by a car just last year, and in order to remember the memory of McIntyre and raise awareness about safe driving, Chris DIPASQUALE started an initiative called the Slow Your Roll campaign.
It was very much fresh with COVID, and the kids were asked to stay home, and unfortunately an accident happened where Charles lost his life, and it just really hit myself and a lot of people in the community really hard, and wanted to bring about a bit of a change and really have people understand that as kids were asked to be out of school, we wanted them to be able to be outside and stay safe.
DIPASQUALE says that the community support has been outstanding for the campaign.
People really backed our initiative and really helped get the word out in the community, and we really wanted to ramp it up this year and just sort of offer more to the community to create more awareness and to really honor the memory of Charles.
All of the proceeds this year will go to support the Mindful Munchies program at the Lethbridge Food Bank.
We were actually able to raise thousands of dollars for their program last year, and we hope to reach that mark this year. We know it's a lot to ask, but we want people to know that 100% of the proceeds go direct to charity. So
you can purchase signage or apparel until April 25th. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Many Canadians are feeling quite isolated and lonely during the pandemic. Pastor Ralph Molyneux with My Victory Church here in Lethbridge says what's difficult is how that loneliness can impact our mental health and make it seem like no one cares.
Loneliness can cause us to maybe feel like people don't care for us, that they don't love us. And then our response to them can sometimes be out of anger or, frustration. And then that only increases our loneliness, because who wants to be around somebody who's always angry and bitter? So you kind of go back to what God's word says is be forgiving and be kind and be gentle, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. They're just some practical things, but the first thing we want to really look at is to be honest with ourselves.
Pastor Ralph will also discuss the importance of connecting with others and the creative ways we can reach out. That interview with Jeanette Rocher is coming up later in our newscast. Moms Stop the Harm is welcoming new funding in BC's budget for addiction and mental health. The newly released budget includes $500 million over 3 years to expand youth mental health programs and add 195 treatment and recovery beds for substance users. It also includes $75 million over 3 years to improve access to mental health services, $53 million for early psychosis interventions, $14 million for First Nations Health Authority, and $8 million for eating disorder care and suicide prevention services. Saskatchewan is dropping the age at which people can receive the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine from 55 to 40. The government's move follows similar decisions in Alberta, BC, Manitoba, and Ontario. Quebec has dropped its age to 45. The government of Saskatchewan says it has around 15,000 doses of AstraZeneca, but only 9,000 doses are readily available right now. Premier Scott Moe says later this month, remaining first responders and other frontline workers will be prioritized for a shot. That includes police officers, firefighters, correctional staff, and teachers. The province also announced that it has extended all existing public health measures to May 10th due to an increase in COVID-19 cases. Christian medical charity Cure International continues to have a long-term impact on children with disabilities they provide treatment for. As they become adults, many give back thanks to their life-changing surgery. One example is a Zambian boy named Philip, whose life was transformed when he received treatment on his legs. We have more now in this report.
When kids receive treatment at a Cure hospital, it can help set them on a new trajectory for life. It can literally change their story. In Zambia, a boy named Philip started to notice that his legs were bowing.
Every time I would walk, my knees would hurt. It was kind of scary because I didn't know what would happen. If maybe it continued, would I get my legs amputated? Would I ever walk again? So I didn't know what was going to happen in future.
In 2011, Philip's mum found out about Cure's hospital in Zambia, and he received corrective surgery on both legs and stayed there for his recovery.
After healing, I was really excited. So it made me happy. I felt this is the change I've been waiting for in my life. I think if you put it on record, that is one of the happiest moments of my life.
Philip finished school and even pursued a master's degree.
Looking at where I've come from, I never thought I would ever get a master's, I would ever reach master's level. And family-wise, I would be the first one to get a master's actually. So it's quite a great achievement for me because I sponsored myself through the master's course.
Philip has a dream of raising awareness for people in need with a movement he started called the 1%.
So 1% basically looks at a minority of people who are making a difference despite the challenging issues that we're going through, despite the challenges we're going through. The 1% looks at people who are making a difference.
So as Philip's life took a major turn for the better thanks to the help he received from Cure, it's hoped through his 1% initiative, many others will also see their lives transformed through God's love in action. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
What a beautiful story. What a beautiful day we had in Lethbridge today. Not a lot of wind, just a few clouds, and we had double-digit temperatures once again. Unfortunately, that won't continue. Details are coming up with a look at the weather in just a moment. It was a gorgeous day in much of southwestern Alberta again today. It felt like spring again, didn't it? Tonight, the clouds will roll in, bringing a chance of rain, even a chance of snow with a low near 2 degrees. Tomorrow, expect snow mixed with rain and a high of only +1. Friday, the sunshine returns with the mercury climbing to 5. Saturday, more clouds and rain mixed with snow developing and a high of only 4. Pretty much the same picture on Sunday with a high near 4 degrees. Monday, a high pressure system returns, clearing out many of the clouds, and we should get up to 10 degrees. Tuesday, expect a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 12. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 14 degrees and an average low of 0. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 1994 at 25 degrees, and the record low was a chilly -16 in 1967. The sun rose today at 6:27 and it will set at 8:33. Let's see how Thursday is shaping up across the country now. Expect sun mixed with cloud and a high of 16 in both Victoria and Vancouver, BC. Clouds, light flurries, a -1 expected in Calgary. A slight chance of flurries and 4 degrees for Edmonton. A slight chance of rain and 13 is on tap for Regina. Considerably cooler in Saskatoon, overcast with a chance of snow and a high of only 2 degrees on Thursday. Lots of sunshine and 18 is on tap for Winnipeg. In the central part of the country, Toronto will be mainly cloudy and 7. Overcast and 6 degrees in Ottawa. Mainly cloudy and 5 for Montreal on Thursday. In Atlantic Canada, expect rain mixed with snow and a high of 6 degrees for Fredericton, New Brunswick. Overcast and rain with a high near 10 for both Halifax, Nova Scotia and Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 10 degrees for Thursday.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
Rogers Communications is offering wireless customers a credit following a massive countrywide outage. The company says that a credit equivalent to Monday's wireless service fee will be applied automatically to May's bills. Company officials say the root cause of the outage was a recent software update by the company's network partner, Ericsson. The company said it is undertaking an in-depth review to prevent similar issues from happening again in the future. The Bank of Canada is predicting brighter economic times ahead. The central bank says the economy will grow 6.5% this year. Now that is up from the growth of 4% it predicted a few months ago. The bank announced earlier today that it is keeping its key interest rate at 0.25%, where it's been so for more than a year. Inflation shot up 2.2% last month following an increase of 1.1% in February. Stats Canada reports the jump is mostly due to a plunge in prices at the start of the pandemic. Gas prices were up 35.3% for March of last year when prices hit a 4-year low as the pandemic gripped the country. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is extending travel restrictions to make it mandatory for international air travelers to quarantine in a hotel at their own expense when arriving in Canada. The measures were first announced back in January. Trudeau is also thanking WestJet and Air Canada for extending voluntary suspension of all flights to Mexico and all Caribbean destinations until May 21st. He says he's considering whether further action is required to stop COVID-19 cases from coming into Canada from abroad, including a possible ban on flights from COVID-19 hotspots, including India. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 102 points on the day to finish at 19,143. The Dow was up 316 points to 34,137. The S&P 500 was up 38 points to 4173. And the Nasdaq was up 163 points on the day to 13,950. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.63 to $61.04 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to $2.70 US. Gold was up 9 cents to $17.9388 US an ounce. And silver was even on the day at $26.55 US an ounce. Wheat is at $325 per metric ton, barley's at $339, canola's at $8.15, and corn is at $375 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 80 cents to $119.78, feeder cattle were down $2.48 to $135.10, and lean hogs were down 48 cents to $107.60. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 80.02 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government wants to hear from you when it comes to putting together a new draft of the kindergarten through grade 6 curriculum. The province has set up an online tool allowing Albertans to provide input as the current draft is being modified. The province is hoping to roll out the new curriculum to elementary school students in 2022 and 2023. There's some who are calling on the Trudeau Liberals to enact the Canada Emergencies Act to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. Political reporter Brian Lilly says that's a bad idea and would be devastating for the provinces. He will explain why in just a moment. One province has secured its own COVID-19 vaccine doses, while others are still trying to work on supply issues. To talk about this in more detail is Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Brian LILLEY, joining me once again from Toronto. Brian, the federal government says all is fine when it comes to vaccine distribution, but let me ask you something. If that's the case, why are Manitoba truckers being vaccinated in North Dakota?
Because Manitoba, like every other province in the country, simply doesn't have enough supply. And this has been an issue from the beginning. It's why Alberta Premier Jason Kenney at one point talked about trying to find doses elsewhere. That didn't work out too well because the vaccine manufacturers don't want to sell directly to provinces. And the ones he could have bought, well, not approved by Health Canada, so you can't legally import them. You've got Ontario Premier Doug Ford calling around to embassies and consulates saying, hey, do you have any spare vaccine? And specifically, he's calling up countries that have put a pause on AstraZeneca and saying, we'll take spare doses if you don't want to use them. So the fact that this is all happening and then Manitoba strikes a deal with North Dakota and they hold a joint news conference with the premier and the governor to say, hey, if you're a Manitoba trucker, you can get vaccinated in North Dakota. That shows you that things are not all well in the state of Denmark. So good on Premier Brian Pallister for doing this. It's an important group of workers, an essential group of workers who've been going back and forth across the border this entire time.
Now, we heard of Moderna vaccine delays last week, and now there's word that shipments from AstraZeneca headed for Canada this week and the first week of May may also be delayed indefinitely. Brian, what's going on?
It's part of the ongoing problem. And look, the shipment delays aren't necessarily the fault of the federal government, but it is their job to make sure that we have adequate vaccine supply. And we've talked in the past about how they signed bad contracts. I mean, this week we found out that for AstraZeneca, we're paying $8.18 a shot, while the European Union paid $2.67 a shot, and the UK paid $3.75 a shot. So we're paying more and getting less, Hal. We're not getting special access. We're not getting faster shipments. In fact, we're getting slower shipments. The AstraZeneca, I believe it's the Covishield vaccine, the Covishield version of the AstraZeneca vaccine made in India. That's being delayed because of the horrible third wave that India is going through at the moment. Moderna, they're having production problems. They've not only delayed their shipments, they've cut them in half. And all the while, the Prime Minister just smiles and says, we've got the biggest and best portfolio of vaccines. It's simply not true.
Now, Brian, despite the slowdowns in deliveries, the age range for getting the AstraZeneca vaccine has been lowered in many provinces. I know here in Alberta, we went from 55 down to 40. What brought about that change? And will you be like our Prime Minister and just head out to your local pharmacy for a shot?
I will be looking up my local Rexall or Shoppers as soon as I can find an appointment and walking in to get that AZ shot. They've opened it up to us Gen Xers because the boomers weren't all that interested in getting it, and it was restricted. I mean, it was 55 to 64. I think a lot of people in that age range were saying, okay, well, I'm 64. It's safe for me, but not someone who's 65. I'll wait for the Pfizer or I'll wait for the Moderna, doing what they can. And those mass vaccination clinics in most provinces have been opened up to those age groups. So we've got all of this AstraZeneca that was just being shielded, not being used because of the age restrictions. Now it's been opened up. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's getting vaccinated. Aaron O'Toole say, I think it's this Saturday he's got an appointment. And I'm just going to walk into one of the local pharmacies I know that has a nice fridge full and get the shot done.
Now, increased restrictions in Ontario have been met with fierce opposition, even though many of the same restrictions are in place in both Quebec and British Columbia without the same level of controversy. Why the difference?
I think part of it comes down to media that's not being honest and people just being opposed to whatever Doug Ford does, in part because he is a conservative premier. You look at the premiers that get beaten up the most over anything they do related to COVID-19. Restrictions, not restrictions. It's Doug Ford and Jason Kenney. And they seem to be the target of the media. Doug Ford more than Jason Kenney because the national media is based here in Toronto. Sometimes I think they believe the entire country is Toronto and they don't realize that there's something beyond Pearson Airport. So, they really do focus in on Toronto and Ontario, and you've got this constant beat of drums of Twitter doctors and TV doctors who called for all these things, by the way. Here in Ontario, many of the doctors and experts who were aghast at what the province did were calling for lockdowns just like Melbourne, Australia. Well, what did Melbourne do? They closed the parks. They shut down golf courses and ski hills and any outdoor recreational activity. They gave police the power to stop you, and you were not allowed to go more than 5 kilometers from your home. Ontario didn't even go that far, and the same people that called for those restrictions were then screaming. I mean, they wanted a curfew one week, they wanted travel restrictions, as well, but they didn't like the idea of police being able to stop you. How do you enforce a curfew? Now British Columbia is doing it. If you're in the Fraser Health region, you can't move to the, I believe the neighboring one is Coastal. This is all very difficult to do. They've got barricades set up around Vancouver to stop people from traveling. I understand why they're doing it or why they say they want to do it. I've been opposed to these ideas from the beginning. I think there are other ways to do it, but it was very disingenuous of many people in the media, in the medical profession, and in political punditry to call for these things for months and then scream in outrage when the government actually did it.
Let's talk about some of the borders being closed as well between provinces. Manitoba, Ontario, now BC's put up the wall for Alberta, so we can't drive across, go to the Radium Hot Springs if we want to do that, a little weekend getaway. It's not essential travel. Yet Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Brian, will not stop flights from COVID hotspots like India from arriving.
Yeah, if you watched the Prime Minister's budget the other day and it made you depressed and you thought, let's go get some cheap beer in Quebec across the river, you couldn't do it. But if you got on a flight, you could go all the way to India, which is in the middle of a horrible resurgence of COVID-19 driven by their double mutant variant. More than 259,000 cases in India on Tuesday into Wednesday, more than 17,000, almost 17,500 deaths in a single day from COVID-19. They're running out of oxygen in their hospitals. They're running out of space. They are literally having funeral pyres to burn bodies. It is a horrible situation, and it is unfortunate that we need to consider closing borders, but we need to keep ourselves safe. And so far, the Prime Minister's not doing that. He announced this week, that we're going to continue to have the ban on travel to sun destinations. Remember, there were all those flights going to Cancun and then coming back to Calgary with people with COVID-19, and they stopped that. Well, guess what? That's still stopped, but you can go to a hotspot like Delhi, India, and come back. And the quarantine measures, as I'm going to be explaining in the pages of the Toronto Sun, are not as strict as people think. It is easy to get around and still claim to be following the rules. We are going to be dealing with this double mutant variant. If it isn't already here, it will be soon unless the government acts. And all they're saying is, we'll look into it.
There's some calls for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to invoke the Emergencies Act to take over from the premiers in the battle against COVID-19. Brian, I have two questions for you. Number one, does he really need consent from the provinces to do this? And number two, why do you think this would be a horrible idea?
Well, yeah, it would be a horrible idea. I'll tell you that in a minute. This is the worst idea. But no, he doesn't need the consent of the provinces. Some people claim that. I keep, every time I write an article, I'll get an email or a comment online. Well, he can't do that unless the provinces agree. No, if he's just imposing it on one province, there's some truth to that. But if he's imposing it on more, all he has to do is consult with the provincial cabinet. The legal language is the governor in council, meaning the federal cabinet, needs to consult with the lieutenant governor in council, meaning the provincial cabinets. Consult is a very fluid word, Hal. He's already sent them a letter and raised this issue in a phone call. That could be considered consultation. Sure, it happened almost a year ago, but that could be considered consultation. So at any time, Justin Trudeau could invoke this. Now, why do I think it would be a horrible idea? Just look at Trudeau's track record. He hasn't dealt with the border. He hasn't dealt with the flights out of India. He hasn't dealt with, flights from any other hotspots, including the U.S. 26 over the past COVID-positive flights from the U.S. over the past couple of weeks. He didn't deal with the border earlier on. That's his responsibility. He's failed on the vaccine front. That's his responsibility. They turned down PPE when Honeywell went to the government as the whole world's looking for PPE. And Honeywell goes to the government and says, we've got N95 masks that we're making. Are you interested? and they were told to go fill out an online form. On every single area that the Trudeau government, the federal government's responsible for, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet have failed. Putting them in charge of the provinces would be an utter disaster.
Now, Brian, the main problem being reported in many provinces in dealing with COVID-19 patients is a lack of intensive care unit beds, but the new federal budget does not really tackle that, and it doesn't promise to boost health funding much either, does it, for the provinces?
No, it doesn't. There's not, this has been the big call from the premiers for years. Become a full partner in healthcare. When healthcare was started, the goal was, or the promise was, 50-50. You provide 50% of the funding, we'll provide 50% of the funding. That got changed over the years, and I understand that, yeah, people will argue, well, due to those changes agreed to by the provinces, it doesn't have to be 50-50. But right now, it's an average of about 22% from the federal government. The premiers have asked for that to gradually go up to 35%. The feds aren't doing that. They're not offering that. There's no significant money for healthcare in a budget that is spending $400 billion more than they're taking in. It's a deficit of $400 billion, and we're still not adding to healthcare. But here's the catch, Hal. They did come up with one thing that you have to agree to if you want extra health funding. Abortion. You've got to be fully on board with their view of health and reproductive services, including abortion. It's mainly aimed at New Brunswick, which does not fund abortions outside of provincial hospitals, meaning they won't fund private clinics. So they're saying you won't get any more money unless you fund private abortion clinics. Funny, they won't do that for cataracts. They won't do that for knee surgeries or hip surgeries or any of the other things that Canadians need. But they're going to say no more money for healthcare unless you sign on to our view of abortion. It's abhorrent.
Wow, that's incredible. It's almost like blackmail. Brian, our debt is approaching $1 trillion. It's incredible right now. Now, with the recent budget, some promises were also made in regards to daycare. What exactly are the Liberals promising here?
They're trying to say we need to get to Quebec-style $10 a day daycare, but to me, it doesn't look like they're offering up enough money. It starts off at $7.5 billion over 3 years. That's a little over $2 billion a year, Hal. That's less than Stephen Harper offered up in 2006. Now, let me do the quick math for you. That was 15 years ago. We've had inflation since then. But if you remember Stephen Harper's pledge of $100 for every child under the age of 6, that amounted to more than they're going to spend now. And the Liberals at that time said it wasn't enough. It was more than their previous national daycare plan, but I digress. Now they're saying we'll build a national daycare plan for $7.5 billion over 3 years, and then we'll increase the funding after that. Well, what that means is they're saying to the provinces, we're going to build a national daycare program. You're going to pay for it. We're going to take the credit. And if you don't do it, we're going to beat you up politically at the ballot box. A national government-run style daycare is not what most Canadians want. It is not, when you ask parents specifically what they want, this ranks at the bottom of the list. And I've been covering this topic for about 20 years, and it has stayed consistent. So there has not been a great move towards this. And despite all the claims that it is incredible for getting women back to work, it's not true. Alberta has, until recently with the economic downturn in Alberta, for the most part, had a higher rate of participation among women in the workforce than Quebec, which has long had this. It started out at $5, now it's up to $10. Alberta has a higher participation rate. If that's the goal, to get more women in the workforce, then why was Alberta more successful than Quebec?
Brian, with the record spending from the Liberals in the budget targeting a wide range of groups, including seniors, is this a precursor to a spring election?
I'm not sure that it is right now due to the COVID-19 cases. As we've talked about several times before, I was really bullish on the idea that they were going to use this for a spring election. The other opposition parties would have a hard time voting it down, so they'd have to find another way. The NDP is upset that pharmacare is not in the budget, but there's the offer of childcare, there's the offer of increased sick benefits and the like. So there's things the NDP want in there. All they need is one party to sign on. I know there's still political maneuvering, as there always is, but with the COVID-19 case numbers up in Ontario, in Alberta, in British Columbia, maybe they don't care as much about Alberta, although I think the Liberals could pick up some seats given the fact that Erin O'Toole is proposed a carbon tax. But, it would be difficult with all of those provinces seeing spikes for them to turn around and call a federal election.
Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Loneliness is often an issue in our society, but with the COVID pandemic, it appears to be on the increase. What's the best way to deal with this? Joining me to discuss this further is Ralph Molyneux. He is the site pastor at Victory Church in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor Ralph. It's so great to have you on today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Pastor Ralph, a recent Ipsos poll revealed that 54% of Canadians say that they're feeling lonely and isolated. So is this consistent with what you're observing in people here in Southern Alberta, with your pastoring and your counseling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some, depending on personality types, are dealing with it better. And some people, they're still doing all the work that they normally did, but others who were forced to isolate and maybe hadn't, cut back on their connections, I can see that being extremely difficult for them. And not only loneliness, but relationship struggles. People's emotional health is struggling because of their emotional, just the things that they're going through.
Exactly. I think it caught everyone by surprise. And all of a sudden we're just finding ourselves in this situation with loneliness. Now, it's interesting that medical studies show that loneliness can cause a number of health issues, including depression, anxiety, increased risks of dementia, and even 26% increased risk of death. So this isn't a trivial thing at all, is it?
No, it's not. And I like that they mention it as a state of health, because those things can deteriorate over time and we don't notice it, so your emotional health and that loneliness, that part of it can just whittle away at you over time. Like, we used to celebrate weddings with large groups of people, and then in times of struggles like funerals, where you used to have those connections, but with a period of time that we don't normally have that in our life, then that deteriorates our overall emotional health. And it can happen like the frog in the boiling water. It happens to a point where all of a sudden people are by themselves and not able to process some of the things they're struggling with.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're seeing that a lot with your counseling, especially like you said, funerals. We can't be together to grieve our loved one. We can't be together to celebrate somebody getting married. It's just tough.
Yeah. The funerals are, the physical touch, none. There's no hugging. I'm not a person that likes to hug a whole bunch, just my personality type, but at times like that, it's non-existent. So there's more times in our life that we experience these changes that again whittle away at our emotional health.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned physical touch, because doctors, of course, say that it's so important, that physical touch is crucial, right? So apparently our health even increases significantly when we get regular hugs and handshakes, and maybe it needs to be done while wearing a mask. I don't know, but we do need that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And I think I've heard it explained this way before, but because that's lacking, I think it was Dr. Townsend or Dr. Cloud, one of the Christian psychologists, said that we all love steak. We all love a good steak, but hamburgers are good too. So it's not the way that we're connecting isn't the best way, but it's still got some value to it, and we have to look at the bright side on that. When we can't have the physical hugs and those types of things, then at least to connect virtually is still better than nothing.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask you, Pastor Ralph, do you have any thoughts on how to overcome loneliness? I mean, the obvious solution is to spend more time with others, but that becomes a real challenge, obviously, during these COVID times. So people, of course, are making the use of technology, like you said.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to do is to give yourself an assessment and be honest with yourself and true to yourself if you're noticing that you're withdrawing from things, or you're finding there's conflict in your relationships, which is what we see a lot of, that conflict increases, and that means that there's something missing from your life. And if you kind of analyze it and see where you're at, you can find some next steps to do, it's the right thing, because loneliness can cause us to maybe feel like people don't care for us, that they don't love us. And then our response to them can sometimes be out of anger or, frustration. And then that only increases our loneliness, because who wants to be around somebody who's always angry and bitter? So you kind of go back to what God's word says, is be forgiving and be kind and be gentle, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. They're just some practical things, but the first thing we want to really look at is to be honest with ourselves. And then I think sometimes people get tired and want to just fix things for people, when really all they're asking for possibly is just a bit of empathy, to understand that they're struggling. And it's in that empathetic moments that we can really connect at a deeper level with people. So I think just to be kind of in tune with what's going on, and look at our environment, what we've been experiencing, and then be more prepared that way, and not over expecting things from other people, because that can be a real a drag on people. If all you ever talk to is that one friend that's just always got so much going wrong, your tendency might not be so much to connect with them, which is the exact opposite of what they need. They just need someone just to hear them. They may not need all the answers or the solutions. Just a lending an ear is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Now, like we said, technology can help, but with some of the older generation, a lot of them might not be as technically savvy. So, I mean, it's still okay to use the telephone as much as possible, get connected with people. But of course, medical experts say that there are significantly greater benefits to social relationships by making time for those face-to-face visits. So I guess the question here is, what is the risk or benefit ratio of visiting people in person during these times?
Well, I think we have to analyze those individuals, because I've met with many of our seniors, and we when COVID first hit, we did what we called CareNet, where we called every single person, and we empowered a bunch of people to call people, which is very unusual. To get a call from a stranger nowadays is like, why are you calling me? But because of the times, we found it really necessary. And I noticed the seniors that I spoke with were so appreciative of just a call or a contact. Because I don't know, I think when we get older, and I'm getting older, I don't know that we get out as much anyways, and I'm not belittling the importance of that initial contact, but I think our seniors are pretty resilient people. But just a touch or a phone call, and or a driveway visit, or a visit through a door, just a few moments of connectivity, I found to be so beneficial, especially with our senior crowd.
Oh, exactly. I know my own mother is in that situation, and I feel like for the past year, it's been nothing more than just really quick, hand each other something in the driveway or through my car door. It's very challenging, because you want to spend all this quality time. And of course, now it's getting warmer outside, so we can arrange for more meetings outdoors. So is that a good solution as well? Meet at a coffee shop patio?
Absolutely. I've been doing a lot of Zoom counseling, mainly because to meet someone in person, if you're indoors, you should be wearing a mask.
Yeah.
But another thing I've been doing is walks, and there's multiple benefits from that. So you'll see me 2 or 3 times a week walking around Henderson, just connecting with somebody around, the lake here in our town, and or the coulees. And I think, again, if we look at it in a positive way, I just say, hey, how'd you like to go for a walk? And then the individuals typically go, yeah, I'm up for that. And then you're both, there's multiple benefits to that, but it feels good to be outdoors as well. But then to see their face not behind a mask is also really important.
Oh, absolutely. Now, how can churches help relieve loneliness? Any thoughts on how to include people who are on their own?
Well, we've just launched a Facebook campus. So there's much more connectivity during the service, because what we found is many people were just watching the screen as a church, and you can watch a screen anywhere, but we were responding much more one-on-one in that aspect through our Facebook campus, which just launched. But we still invite people out, and then we watch that connectivity online, and then ask them if there's anything. Just ask them if there's anything we can do, for them. They need a hand with something. Is it a physical need, or maybe it's finances or groceries or things like that. And then in that, we also have been inviting people to begin to serve, because I found that many people wanted to be busy doing something rather than sitting in an empty house. So at that point, we said, well, let's empower you to do those care calls. And how would you like to connect with 10 people each week, just to see how they're doing, just a 10-minute conversation or 3-minute conversation. So to get people active, I think is a real key thing to keep the loneliness down, because, we're made on purpose for a purpose. And when that changes, we need to get active and just say, okay, look, we're just not going to sit locked up. There's things we can do even in that state. And churches have been, I believe, instrumental in caring for that health of other individuals in our community through this whole deal.
That's wonderful. Now, for disabled individuals, the loneliness factor apparently doubles, and that's something to keep in mind during these times, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I hats off to anybody who's caring for an individual, because, in some cases it's a matter of life and death. But I think through the studies and things like that, we still did our Night to Shine this year, but we sent out the packages to everybody. So for each of those individuals, maybe within whatever the issues are, to receive that package in the mail and then to connect with them just virtually a little bit made a difference. So again, receiving, there's other ways we can connect with people through gifts and dropping a meal, or, just a card, or even, something that was special to them, that they feel loved. And I think that's really, really important for every individual.
Yeah, absolutely. For our viewers that don't know, what are in the packages for Right to Shine?
Well, in those, it was a crown, and I think they got some party favors, like, different items that they could kind of have a celebration together, because that was what it was. Night to Shine was a celebration, like almost like a graduation for them. And so that was what they would receive in their package. And then we just encourage them just to connect with a photo and send that back, to our team here. And then at least it was another event, different, but it was something that they got used to look forward to yearly, and that didn't stop. It just was different. That's all.
Right. Now, what about for children? Any thoughts on how to get kids engaged and not to fall into that pit of loneliness, or that pit of just all that screen time too?
Well, you see a lot of people doing very unique things, like drive-bys for birthday parties. I know both of my grandkids, we visited them through COVID at times, sometimes through a window, or through Zoom, or FaceTime. But you can get pretty creative in getting things active with kids. But I also know that kids are really good at connecting online. They've done that for years, where they've got gamer friends and game tags that they are connected with, and that's, they're sitting in their basement, for hours on end. But I think the important part, what you mentioned on, was how do you get them out? And as parents, like a scooter, a skateboard, any kind of gift that gets them outdoors is probably the best for them right at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's ironic because we want to keep our kids off the screen. There's too much screen time going on. But during COVID, like you said, it's a great way for them to connect. So you almost are kind of almost thankful for all that screen time. They can connect with other communities, like you said, gamer communities and whatnot. But absolutely exercise and get outside now that it's springtime, especially, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then, of course, where would we be without the Word of God, right? Seeking His presence.
That's very true. I'm going to share a little scripture with you guys. 1 Peter 3, it says, "Who's going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer from what is right, you are blessed. Don't fear threats. Do not be frightened, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks, and give a reason that the hope that you have. And that's one thing we can share during this whole season and continue to share, is that we do have the hope of Christ in our lives, and he has a purpose for us. And if you want to partner with an organization, I think that's a really good way to battle loneliness, is to get out and help someone else who's also in need. And you're likely to make a connection that way if you're empathetic to their situation, and you're managing your own personal mental health as well. But I think this is a real time for the church to shine and care for our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today, Pastor Ralph. We really appreciated having you on.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Ralph Molyneux is the site pastor at My Victory Church in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.